Hello everyone and welcome to Cinema Gulp's first ever Halloween mixer. Hey everyone, this is Ben.
And this is John.
And today we're doing the first ever Cinema Gulp's Halloween mixer. Here we review 6 horror films from 3 different subgenres, 2 at random and 1 a choosing of our own. Here's how it works. We drew from a bag containing many subgenres of horror to collect 3 different genres. From there, each of us selected a film from one genre on our own for ourselves to watch, and the other 2 we selected for one another. We're going to start off with the genre from the films that we picked for ourselves. So we don't know what these films are. I don't know what John picked for himself, and he doesn't know what I picked. So, to unveil our first subgenre. Okay, so John's going to go first with the subgenre of classic horror. I'm dying to know what John picked. John, what was your pick for classic horror?
All right, Ben, my classic 50s or before horror movie is The Bad Seed from 1956.
I fucking love that movie.
You've seen it?
Yeah, I love it.
Nice. Okay, good. The film stars Nancy Kelly as Christine Penmark, Patty McCormick as Rhoda Penmark, Evelyn Varden as Aunt Monica, Henry Jones as Leroy, and Eileen Heckart as Hortense Daggle. Nancy Kelly, Patty McCormick, and Eileen Heckart were all nominated for Academy Awards. Nancy Kelly as lead actress, Patty McCormick and Eileen Heckart as supporting actress. The film was directed by Mervyn Leroy. The Bad Seed was originally a book that was made into a play, then made into a movie. The film tells the story of a lovely, well-to-do housewife who suspects that her seemingly perfect 8-year-old daughter is a heartless killer. The Bad Seed is a movie I wanted to see for a long time. It's a simple title that has always stuck with me from my youth as a classic fright flick that needs to be seen. It's a film I bought on DVD but never got around to watching. I've always remembered that it was an early horror film that actually got Oscar nominations for acting, so I was okay adding it to my collection. I'm glad I did because I found it to be a well-made thriller for its day. Obviously, with this being from the 50s, it's not an overtly violent or frightening film. Most acts of violence happen off-screen or are discussed and described by the characters. The frights are more of a psychological kind. The horror comes from the mother's realization of what her daughter is capable of, what secrets lay in her past, and decisions she may have to make to protect innocent lives from the evil that is her bad seed. The movie is shot very much like the stage play it was based on. It has only a few settings. Blocking, lighting, and art direction all feel very stagey. The acting is melodramatic and theatrical, but that was the style of the day, so not out of place. Even though many elements feel like a stage play, the camera work, editing, and direction all add a cinematic feel to everything. I thought the writing had a nice flow. Again, because it's the 50s, it has a bit of melodrama and extra exposition to spoon-feed the audience, but the writing and dialogue worked for me. It had an organic flow to the conversations and paced out the mysterious elements of the story well. There are a few painfully obvious bits of foreshadowing used, but again, it's the 50s. The cast was a lot of fun. Everyone had a very distinct character to play. Each character is played very broad, reaching towards caricature, but that's also typical of the era. The thing that really works is every character is interesting. Everyone has their moment to shine. A number of characters have humorous scenes that really help to balance the more serious melodramatic outbursts. The Penmark's landlady, Aunt Monica, and her brother Emery have great comedic chemistry. Leroy, the dim-witted handyman, has a number of fun scenes with Rhoda, as he is one of the first to suspect Rhoda is hiding something. On the serious side of things, we have Eileen Heckart. She plays Hortense Daggle, the mother of one of Rhoda's classmates who recently drowned during a school picnic. This has driven her to become a lush. Her scenes are very over the top in my opinion. Although the heartbreak of her lost child is evident in her performance, the wild, flailing, over-the-top drunkenness she displays comes across as almost comical. I'm not sure I would have given any of these 3 actresses an Academy Award nomination, but I'd have to see the competition from that year. Nancy Kelly as Christine the mother and Patty McCormick as Rhoda both do a fine job with their roles, but as stated before, they feel very theatrical. Rhoda is a precocious little saccharine-sweet suck-up, all bright eyes, rosy cheeks, and golden pigtails. She's like Shirley Temple hiding a sinister smile. Although melodramatic, I thought Nancy Kelly did a good job as the film moves into its darker scenes towards the end. I would not call this a true horror film. I think it could be called a thriller of its day, but to me, it mostly feels like a drama with some really dark moments and serious themes on display. The film has a surprise ending that I thought was fun to see, but feels like a cop-out. It comes out of nowhere, literally. But as the disclaimer at the end of the film says, May we ask that you do not divulge the unusual climax of this story. I will not divulge. You'll have to see it for yourself. Overall, I thought this was an entertaining story with colorful characters and delightful 50s-era performances. The direction was solid and the score does a great job setting the mood for this chilling tale. For the audience chuggability, I would recommend this if you like 50s-era classic melodrama with a serious story at its core. I would consider this to be thirst-quenching. For my Gulp score, I'm going to give this a 5.5.
Yay, John, that was an excellent pick for yourself. I gotta say, I love The Bad Seed. Your review is so spot on. The last time I saw that movie was about 5 years ago. The blocking, it is exactly like a stage play. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. The ending does totally come out of nowhere. Okay, so on to my pick.
I'm really excited to hear what it is. It's a mystery.
Oh, boy. Yeah, it was an exciting week leading up to watching this movie. Was it as exciting watching it as it was waiting for it to show up in the mailbox? My pick for classic horror comes from 1935 by director Stuart Walker in Werewolf of London. On an expedition in Tibet, Dr. Wilfred Glendon, played by Henry Hull, is attacked in the dark by a strange animal. Returning to London, he finds himself turning nightly into a fucking werewolf and terrorizing the city, with the only hope for his curing his affliction, a rare Tibetan flower. Not the rare flower that Batman has to carry up the mountain to get to the League of Shadows, an entirely different type of Tibetan flower. What I thought of Werewolf of London, first of all, this just echoes everything about horror in the 1930s. This has beautifully shot scenes, all handmade sets that feel of that era of London. You can tell it was completely shot in Hollywood, but it gives you that good feel. Camera work in this for the time is totally amazing and a total treat to your eyes. The fun, soft, and eerie transitions give the film a nice creepiness. Some of the makeup was really good for the 30s, and the in-camera optics and stuff like that for the time were pretty great, considering the type of film they had to shoot on. Some of the people that round out the cast, we have Valerie Hobson as the love interest Lisa Glendon, who did a pretty decent job as the one that screams too loud to where it overmodulates the sound equipment from that time. The real loud, vibrating, destroys your ears type of scream. I swear the score of this movie is identical to every single classic horror film of that era. Like, they're all basically the exact same thing. But it works, and it works well. The story of the movie's pretty simple. The Wolfman, the original Wolfman, I think from 41, and this one actually has a few more frights in it, even though I thought the original Wolfman was a pretty frightening film. This one actually is scarier. The way they do the makeup on Wilfred's face, he's kind of half man, half werewolf. It doesn't come off as this like Chewbacca mask. He really has this kind of creepy, almost vampiric look to his face. The same thing with John's. It's not an overly violent film. The violence usually comes from him grabbing a hold of a guy's neck from behind and yanking him back and forth, and then it cuts or goes dark. You would think a werewolf would just tear someone's fucking throat out with their fangs, but for some reason in those older films, they always just reach for their throat and strangle them to death. But all in all, this was a very enjoyable film. I would say for audience chuggability, for its era, and for this time as well, this one is definitely a thirst quencher, and I would give it 6 gulps.
Werewolves are one of my favorites, so I'd be interested in checking that movie out. I mean, I love American Werewolf in London.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to our second genre. Now, from here on out, these next 2 genres, these are films that John and I picked for one another, so we did not know what we were getting. So the second subgenre we're going with is...
I'll swallow your soul! I'll swallow your soul! I'll swallow your soul!
Swallow this.
So the religious/possession movie that I selected for John was Burnt Offerings.
This film was directed by Dan Curtis. He mainly did TV work like Dark Shadows and TV movies like The Night Stalker and Trilogy of Terror. The movie stars Karen Black as Marion Rolfe, Oliver Reed as Ben Rolfe, Betty Davis as Aunt Elizabeth, Burgess Meredith as Arnold Allardyce, Eileen Heckart as Roz Allardyce. Ben and Marion Rolfe rent a grand old country mansion as a summer getaway for themselves, their 12-year-old son Davy, and Ben's Aunt Elizabeth. Despite some reservations, they feel they can't turn down the rent deal offered to them by the house's owners, siblings Roz and Arnold Allardyce. First amongst these reservations is the fact that the Allardyce's aged mother will be staying in her room on the top floor. The Rolfes are to provide a tray of food left outside her room 3 times a day, which Marion vows to take care of on her own. As the summer progresses, the family members individually begin to exhibit unusual and unexplainable behavior. The unusual and unexplainable things start happening around the house as well. These occurrences threaten both the loving family dynamic as well as the individual lives of the 4. The answers to what is happening may be who or what lies behind the closed and often locked door of Mrs. Allardyce's bedroom. This is a film that wasn't on my radar before Mixers. I think I'd heard the title but didn't know a thing about it. I have Mixers to thank for getting me to see this forgotten 70s gem. I thought this was a smart, unique take on a haunted house story. This was a creepy film that uses atmospheric cinematography and an ominous score to coat the film in a foreboding sense of dread that leads to a shocking and memorable conclusion. I think the film benefits from a second viewing, not that you won't know what happened the first time around, but once you know how it ends, it sheds new light on many of the subtle clues and small hints that this fabulous screenplay employs. The film can feel like it's moving a bit slow by today's standards, but I thought it had a nice pace for an older film. There was always something creepy happening or in the works, even if it takes its time. It's not a very frightening film while watching it. I think the spooky factor comes more into play once the film is done and you know the concept behind the haunted house twist. For the most part, I think the entire cast does a good job with their roles. The acting is not as theatrical as The Bad Seed or the 50s, but still had an element of melodrama to their style. At times, the performances feel natural and real, like when everyone is getting along as a family. Other times, the performances go a bit overboard in some of the more intense moments. I really liked the chemistry between the 4 family members. It helped to make them likable early on so you can really get sucked into their struggle. My favorite performance was Bette Davis. She brought so much energy to this performance as the spunky 74-year-old Aunt Elizabeth. She's the main source of humor in the film, but I also found her performance to be the most natural and subtle. Her moments of intensity are perfection. She nails these scenes and provides some of the film's most chilling moments. Oliver Reed of Gladiator fame is good as well. His character is haunted by childhood memories of his mother's funeral, often seeing a creepy chauffeur dressed in black, played by the Grim Reaper-looking Anthony James from Unforgiven. These visions intensify over the course of the film. Reed's performance during these scenes becomes very physically intense. It's impressive, but a bit over the top. I worried his head might blow up like in Scanners. Overall, his performance is good and becomes more and more unhinged as the film goes along. Karen Black does a fine job as well. Burgess Meredith, Mickey from Rocky, and Eileen Heckart from The Bad Seed play the brother and sister who rent out the house for the summer. They are a great pair and are effectively creepy in their few scenes. Their dialogue is one of the aspects that takes on a new meaning a second time around. Overall, a very likable ensemble cast. The direction is not very stylistic. It's shot more like a TV movie than a cinematic feature. One scene in particular I feel the director did really well was a scene at the pool with the father and son. The combination of editing, acting, and score in this scene leaves the viewer gasping for air. Definitely one of the most intense moments of the film. The director does a good job with the creepy atmosphere. The film has a hazy, dreamlike quality to the cinematography, very 70s looking. The score is very prevalent through the whole film. It's not very original, but it's effective enough to set the dreadful tone. The film is mostly bloodless, it's rated PG. It does have one big shocking moment of on-screen bloody violence, and that moment alone would have been rated R today. There is an element of possession involving Karen Black's character. She has a strange attachment to the house and begins to care for the house like her own child or a loved one. One confusing aspect of her performance, or the possession she is under, was that when her real child is in danger, she can see past the power or allure of the house, but has other moments where that wasn't kept consistent. Overall, I found Burnt Offerings to be a satisfying creepfest with strong performances and a knockout ending that gives the film its real fright factor. I think some people may want more gore and scares from a mid-70s horror film, but if you're a fan of spooky gothic thrillers, this one delivers. For our audience chuggability, I would say this falls right between thirst-quenching and top shelf. And for my Gulp Gauge score, I'm going to give this a 6.5.
You definitely sold me on it. I gotta check it out.
So for the religious/possession horror movie that I picked for Ben was John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness.
Any John Carpenter fan can tell that Prince of Darkness was right off the heels of another gem of his, Big Trouble in Little China. It employs many of his in-camera optics as well as his green color palette and lighting. It feels more intelligent than some of Carpenter's other films. He wrote it and credited himself in the film under the name Bernard Quatermass. Quatermass was a fictional British scientist who was once written as a head of a British experimental rocket group. All this was fiction. Not sure what was going on in John Carpenter's head during that that move, but whatever it was, it kind of added to the flair of the film. This film's a slow burn and very atmospheric. The story revolves around a priest who invites a professor and his group of grad students, all in various departments of science, to take part in an investigation of a mysterious cylinder containing a moving green substance. Soon the group comes to find that the text that was found with the cylinder is in fact the language of Satan. The most unique aspect of the film is how it theorizes that Satan may very well be the embodiment of antimatter, and not actually a mythological spirit. The film uses ways to bring science into the mix when deciphering the various elements of Satanism. It suggests that Satan is manifested from a much more powerful presence, an evil substance. This stuff's brilliant. The investigation takes place in an old abandoned church that in and of itself is a masterpiece of fear. Its walls, the mood, the sounds, the back alleys, these things are all just straight out of nightmares. Once the investigation starts and the language begins to be deciphered, homeless zombies, which I've come to call zombums, appear and surround the church. And yes, Alice motherfucking Cooper plays the head zombum. This is one of John Carpenter's more mature outings, dare I say. It's got some really good gory death scenes, don't get me wrong, and the scenario itself of a bunch of grad students stuck in a big abandoned church being completely surrounded by zombums with the infestation going on inside the church is fucking terrifying. There are certain points in this film where you're trying to figure out what the ultimate goal of this team is, though. It's almost like they're monitoring what's manifesting from the cylinder, but they're not actually trying to stop it. There's a lot of moments in the film that remind me of Big Trouble in Little China, especially when we're seeing characters stuck in corridors and hiding around corners. The score, also from John Carpenter, though his scores are usually fairly similar, yet haunting. This one definitely sounds a lot like the score from Big Trouble in Little China. Plus, one can't ignore the fact that Dennis Hun Wang himself from Big Trouble in Little China is in this movie, and he's a blast as he chews the scenery up, probably being the most likable character of all the students. Donald Pleasance is also really good here, adding a real natural, charismatic priest, which he always does so well. Always good seeing him in Carpenter films. And Egg Shen himself, Victor Wong, also appears in this film. He's just awesome in everything, and I wish he was still doing films. I love John Carpenter. I love the story that he gives us here. It's interesting and thought-provoking before it becomes all-out madness and disgusting. It's eerie with the best of his work, and the 80s synth that he gives it just gives wonders to the mood. The shots are great. The editing, while dwelling and long-winded sometimes, still helps create a wonderful Carpenter horror classic. This film's final act is so grotesque and the makeup job is so fantastic and detailed, it's almost hard to watch. For my audience chuggability, I would give Prince of Darkness a top shelf recommendation, and I would give it 7.5 gulps.
Very nice. I have not seen that in a long time. It's a movie I own, so I'm definitely going to revisit it. I'm interested to remind myself how gory it is, because I haven't seen it in so long. I don't really remember what the ending holds for me.
It's not a movie to be eating dinner while watching. I'll tell you that much. Okay, so we're moving on to our third and final subgenre, which is okay, and the slasher horror movie that I picked for John is the I was going to say classic. Is the 1982 film Pieces.
My slasher movie is Pieces from 1982. The film was directed by Juan Piquer Simon. This early 80s grindhouse production is considered a B horror movie from the golden era of slasher movies. I would say that's a really unfair assessment, unfair to an actual B movie like Evil Dead or Howard the Duck. Pieces is a Z-grade horror movie. Z for zero plot, zero skill behind the camera, zero ability by the cast, zero character development, zero tension, frights, and thrills, zero attempts at well-done production values such as cinematography, production design, costumes, sets, locations, audio quality, and musical score. This movie has a number of gory, bloody, mutilated body effects that I'm sure for 1982 were shocking and satisfying to the Splatterhouse audience, but these effects are just laughable today. Personally for me, this movie had zero enjoyment. One positive, I guess I liked the font they used for the title credit sequence, with the dripping blood. It was kind of cool. The story, if you can call it that, involves a serial killer on the loose on a college campus, cutting up co-eds with a chainsaw. Sure, that's the plot for most of these cheesy slasher flicks, but some find a way to make that paper-thin concept feel fun and inventive. The script bounces between scenes of our slasher slowly stalking a victim and the investigators and college staff trying to solve the case. The dialogue is so stupid and stilted, nothing remotely approaching a real conversation. There's a ton of unintentional funny lines and strange bits of dialogue throughout.
The most beautiful thing in the world is smoking pot and fucking on a waterbed.
We're just out buying clothes without labels and trying them on for size.
The terrible dubbing in this movie adds a lot to the humor. The horrible score, credited to someone named Cam, is a redundant and remedial bass riff. It's played over every stalking and slashing scene with very little effectiveness. One scene with a girl stripping down poolside uses a sexy saxophone melody, and as soon as the striptease ends, we switch right back to the repetitive bass riff. This movie has jarring musical shifts when cutting from murders to investigation scenes. There's no attempt to let the music fade in or out from scene to scene. I have to admit, I was surprised at how well known the cast was. James Mason plays the Dean, Horshack plays Kendall, the sex god.
Hey, shut up, will ya? You wanna wake up the whole college hollering like that?
Oh,
What do you have to make such a big production for? Are you crazy?
Oh, Kendall.
You want us thrown out?
George Siegel, as Sam Spade, plays Lieutenant Bracken. His partner is played by Frank Drebin, and Angie Dickinson plays policewoman/tennis pro. To round out the cast of red herrings, we have Bluto, Professor Lupin, and Napoleon Dynamite. We never get to know any of the victims. They're all just dead meat who are introduced either stripping, dancing, or dressing provocatively moments before they are literally cut to pieces. Another problem with the movie is there is no one to care about, no rooting interest. Most of the main cast is never in danger, with the exception of Horshack and policewoman tennis pro. At one point, they must fend off Bruce Lee, which many point out as a scene so pointless and out of place that it makes no sense in a movie that has no sense. I disagree. This scene is a pivotal bit of foreshadowing to clue us into the fact that Horshack is a karate master, skills he will use in the final showdown with our chainsaw killer. Horshack's other skill is located in his pants. Apparently with the help of his Christmas sweater, he gets more pussy than John Stamos at a Full House reunion. Too bad his nuts don't survive the movie. They become the movie's final victim during the ridiculous surprise ending. I really wish all of these characters had become victims of the chainsaw killer. I was so sure Napoleon Dynamite was going to bite the dust.
Casanova!
At least this annoying Joker finally gets slaughtered in Friday the 13th Part 3.
It's working. Nice makeup job. Stop fooling around, man.
I think this scene perfectly illustrates how terribly written this movie is, how lazy the production values are, and how silly the dialogue and acting can be. Take note of the 2-page blue file folder that Frank Drebin can't seem to get through without a couple bumps of cocaine.
He cut that poor girl in half while she was still alive. You have any idea the tear that kid went through? She was still alive, for Christ's sakes.
I know, Lieutenant, I know. But I'm doing the best I can. If I go too fast, I might miss something. You just gotta give me more time.
We don't have any more time. Take some uppers or something. Just give me a lead. Anything.
What I need is some help. I've been going 23 hours straight, but my eyes can't take it any longer. I'll do my best.
Later, Horshack is looking at the same 2-page folder and determines the vital information the plot has been waiting on the entire movie. Funny thing is, the pages look completely blank. Also gotta love the Wendy's product placement. This film innovates, Michael Bay follows. Overall, my opinion of this movie is that it was an awful waste of film. It's only enjoyable if you can watch it with a bunch of friends and try and have a good laugh at it.
While we were out here fumbling with that music, the lousy bastard was in there killing her! Bastard! Bastard! Bastard!
It can be enjoyed as a guilty pleasure for those who like campy schlock. It has enough wacky and unintentionally humorous scenes strung together to give you some laughs. Watching it by myself, It didn't provide that setting to rip the film with buddies. I first saw this movie as a kid back in the late 80s or early 90s. As a kid, this movie seemed scary, violent, and grotesque. It had that taboo factor of being a grindhouse gore fest with lots of naked lady flesh to be flashed and filleted. Seeing it now, it doesn't hold up at all. The nudity is exploitive rather than titillating, the gore effects are mainly just a lot of blood splatters, many scenes only showing the aftermath rather than the actual killing on screen. I would not recommend this to anyone looking for a real attempt at filmmaking. This is pure schlock dialed up to 11. It's not scary, it's not gory enough, and it's just downright awful at all other aspects of movie making. I would say for audience chuggability, this is vomit-inducing. And for my gulp score, I'm going to give this a 0.
You see, John, I picked that one because I knew you'd enjoy it. You're very welcome. It is a guilty pleasure, and it's a drinking game buddies movie, just like you said. It's a piece of shit, but on the other hand, sometimes that's what makes it good. And I think the tearing of the dick off at the end is one of the best endings of any movie I've ever seen. So,
all right, and for the slasher film that I picked for Ben, I picked Black Christmas.
Okay, Black Christmas, directed by the great Bob Clark, who would actually go on to do such 80s classics like Porky's and A Christmas Story. Black Christmas is quite possibly the template used later on in horror of the subgenre of slasher films. Sure, there were ones before it like Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and, to a certain extent, Psycho, but Black Christmas really started all the standards that we've seen since in slasher films. It uses musical cues when needed to evoke tension. It gives us a great setup of characters and where they live, which is ultimately the one and only big set location in the film. I love horror films that are confident enough to be set pretty much in one simple location all the way through. It gives you atmospheric building. It allows the model to shape itself into a character in and of itself within the film. And this house certainly does that well. The house I'm talking about is a sorority house, and the film really benefits greatly from doing that. This movie is super fucking freaky. Not so much with the death scenes, but with the setup of the death scenes. The way our killer stalks these girls in his own way, the phone calls, everything is just shit in your pants dance. Right off the bat, I knew I was gonna like this movie when I saw the name, the great John Saxton, in yet another sheriff of a small town role. Where did he do that before, you ask? Well, A Nightmare on Elm Street. You have to love that. I love how this movie opens with a really long, drawn-out credit sequence. A lot of the times that doesn't work in film. Here it works perfectly because we see a large, wide shot of our sorority house, which is mainly the focus of the film, as we slowly zoom in during the credit scenes. It's eerie as fuck. The sorority house is covered in Christmas lights, but there's this sense of dread, almost like you're looking at a haunted house. It's a nice contrast of ideas there. I'm a huge fan of POV camera work when done correctly, and this movie, when showing us through the killer's eyes, knocks it out of the fucking park. The phone calls that come in to the girls are super creepy. This is one of those films that, again, you see ideas in this film that you would see later on in other movies, but possibly hadn't seen before. The movie When a Stranger Calls, which came out just, I believe, 2 or 3 years after this, basically stole the exact same plot from this film when all is said and done. It's a slow movie, very slow. There's lots of times where you're even forgetting that you're watching a horror film. It takes its time. It creates the characters. We see the characters move through the film. At some points you wonder if a character you're invested in is even going to stick around till the end of the film, not by being killed, but just by going off and doing something else. There are characters in this film that just literally end up having nothing to do with the overall outcome, but we spend enough time with them where it's kind of misdirection in that way. And I like that. This film focuses on one girl played by Margot Kidder, where you believe that she's sort of the main focus who's going to be the sole survivor. Then it shifts and it goes to another character, and she becomes the one that the film focuses on, and Margot Kidder sort of goes away. I like how they play with your senses like that. You're not sure who the film is following, but in the end, it's really following the killer, even though we don't see the killer, which is another brilliant move. This movie is genius because it never goes, dun dun dun, here's your killer. It's the guy from the liquor store that said hi to you. The lack of the reveal at the end really helps keep this movie so dreadful. The movie, especially towards the end, has a lot of tension, a lot of fear. I think it can be argued that in the realm of slasher movies, this is a fairly brilliant film. Plus, there's a bunch of porno hot 70s chicks in this movie, and half of them are British. So I love this film. On the audience chuggability, I would give this one a top shelf recommendation, almost right there at perfect pour, and I would give this movie 8 gulps And let's not forget, the director Bob Clark went on to do a couple of the worst films in recent memory, Baby Geniuses and Baby Geniuses 2, How the Mighty Have Fallen.
So he continued directing horror films right till the end.
There you go. He actually did a shit ton of like 80s comedies.
Yeah.
Like Loose Cannons.
Okay.
So yeah, this was a fun experiment. What I selected for myself, I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed Werewolf of London. It's good to give yourself that obstacle to try to find something that, forget about what you've heard is good, just like finding something at random that you've heard of or maybe you haven't heard of before, discovering a new film. Doing the classic one was a lot of fun because those movies can be really fucking shitty.
Well, that's what I loved about this whole process of Mixers. I saw 2 films I had never seen before, one that I hadn't seen for a long time. So it's great to get us to watch some older films that we're not always watching. Like I said, Bad Seed is something that I own, that I've had on my shelf for a long time, knew I would get around to seeing it eventually, but had no desire to just pop it in. And I'm glad that this got me to watch it because I really enjoyed it.
What was your favorite of your 3?
I would say Burnt Offerings. No, definitely not Pieces. Pieces of shit for sure. No, I really enjoyed Burnt Offerings. I found that was the one that I did actually watch twice, because once you get to that final reveal, it's like I said, it's not like you were lost and the whole movie changes. You saw this kind of coming, but when they confirm it, sheds new light on things, that little moments in the film that if you see it a second time, you just kind of clue in on some of these things and say, oh, okay, that's interesting, that's intelligent.
I have a hard time deciding which one I like the best out of the 3. I feel that I gave Black Christmas the highest chuggability and gulp score, but that was mostly because of what a pioneer it was, and also because of the filmmaking. I think watching Prince of Darkness was funner, but that's because John Carpenter's movies are fun, you know? I mean, Black Christmas, I'll just chalk it up to that. Black Christmas is a slightly better quality film, but Prince of Darkness is a blast to watch. There's so much crazy shit going on in that movie.
Yeah, Black Christmas is another one I haven't seen in a long time, but when I saw it, I was kind of blown away by it. Just like you said in your review, it certainly created the template for all of those films that followed, but almost did it better than those films do it. And it was super creepy. I do remember it being, I was creeped out by that movie. Love the POV camera work they use in it. I don't remember exactly how it ends and how they do or don't let you know who the killer is or whatever. But yeah, that's one that I'm going to revisit after doing this, because I want to check it out again.
Yeah, you should. And I've got Burnt Offerings to look forward to. That's the only one I haven't seen. I'm going to watch that soon. All right, everybody. Well, we hope you enjoyed our Halloween special. This was a blast for us. We hope you guys enjoyed listening to it. Check out these horror movies, damn it, because it was hard for us to not give away everything in them. We did that so you guys can go out and fucking watch them, right?
For sure, yeah. We tried to keep this as spoiler-free, except for maybe on something like Pieces, which is a piece of shit anyway, so...
You gave away the biggest twist out of all of them. Hey, the thing is still alive and it rips his dick off. Okay, well, for Cinema Gulp, everyone, have a nice, spooky Halloween. This is Ben.
And this is John. I want to drink your cinema.
We got a bunch of fucking vampires out there trying to get in here and suck our fucking blood.